So Charlotte asked me to share a little bit of my story, and the funny thing is exactly 10 years ago today, I probably would not have been able to talk about it because I was a hot mess. So in July of 2006, I got married to my college sweetheart. He was a baseball player, I was an RA in college, and combined we felt like we knew the entire school. And life was good. In August, I started graduate school for 2 master's degrees, a master's in clinical child psychology and a specialist in school psych. And my goal was to get 2 master's degrees in 2 years, practice school psychology for a few years, and then go on the admin route. And I wanted to be an assistant principal at a middle school and then move up from there. And having the background of the clinical child psychology and the special education, I felt like really gave me a good ground to make a difference in the school districts. Loved photography, I loved church, helped out in our church that I went to church at in college every time the door was open. And so in December 2007, we moved to Oklahoma City. Chip got a job offer. He was a security data analyst, basically an ethical hacker. And we moved to Oklahoma City, just 1 credit shy of finishing all those degrees. 1 credit, 1 class. And anyway, so he started this great job, and he went off for training in California. February 24th, came back in May. I love you, and I'm not in love with you, and I don't want to work on it, and I don't love Jesus. I'm out. Packed up my gray Honda Accord and left me in the middle of Oklahoma City. No friends, no family, they just moved there, and left me and went back to St. Louis and then bounced around with some chick from New York and Las Vegas. And it was hard. It was very lonely. And the sad part about it all was we had been in the church together. We had led a small group. Like, I just completely blindsided and did not see it coming at all. There were no warning signs. But the bigger picture for me that hurt the most is he had left Christ. And so through the pain and through the loneliness, the deeper pain was, holy cow, he doesn't love Jesus anymore. Like, this is not fair. I didn't deserve this, and I don't want this label on me. I grew up Southern Baptist, and I just known that if you are divorced, you can't serve in the deacon. You can't be a deacon. That was a male role, but you can't serve the way that others can. And so I just felt this heavy weight and shame when something had failed, and I needed 1 class. So not only did I fail at not getting 2 master's degrees, but I had failed at my marriage, despite how hard I fought for it. So my prayer through this journey of loneliness and being in the middle of the unknown was, God, catch me and don't let me hit rock bottom. Because it feels to me, I don't know about you, but when you're walking through a hard time, whether it be going through something with your kids' teachers, maybe you feel your kids being bullied, or through a hard time in your marriage, or a really stressful time with finances, or a hard time at work or with your spouse's work. For me, there are a lot of people who have comments to say of how to fix it. And I had a lot of good and bad comments of how to fix my marriage. And it was ultimately, hey, he doesn't want to love and follow Christ, and he very colorfully told me he didn't want me to be part of it. And he was out with some chick. So God, catch me and don't let me hit rock bottom. Help me to be more like you along the way. Help me know that I need you and see your light in my life. Keep me from bitterness. I had crossed paths with a lot of women who had walked through the journey of divorce, and they had just become very bitter towards men. And I didn't want to have that be a part of my character. So let me not be a man-hater. Literally was one of my prayers daily, over and over. Let me not be, this is something he has chosen, but this is not what all men are like. Just please don't let me be that man-hater down the road. So my third prayer was, one day, I want to be married again. Despite the fact that this has happened to me, and I've done everything right, I fought so hard. Don't let me have to explain myself. Oh, well, you got married too? No, I didn't. We were together for 4 years. We loved Jesus. I didn't want to have to explain, I promised he was a Christian. I promised that we waited and did all the right things at the right times. I didn't want to explain that to somebody. I didn't want to have to justify myself and have to relive all of that. And it sounds really weird, but that was just something that I prayed. I didn't want to explain myself to my husband and his parents and his friends and just walk through that. And then I went from Mandy Thornton, to Mandy Durland, and then I was back to Mandy Thornton at the bottom of the alphabet. And I didn't like it. I really liked being a Durland and going first. Like, it was just, you just could go faster. And so I literally, at the time, I was a YMCA aquatic manager in Moore, Oklahoma, and I oversaw 3 different pool sites. And I remember I was walking around the pool, and I was in the burst of, like, just emotional collapsing. And so I started heading to, like, the back room, which is equivalent to, like, over here. And I just collapsed on the floor. I was like, God, he has got to be, whoever that guy is down the road, he has got to outdo D. Literally, I was like, I'm quirky and weird, right? Like, we all have our weird, quirky. He has got to outdo D. A, B, or C. Anybody else is disqualified for me. Literally. So the weekend, actually would have been 10 years ago, this weekend, that ship left me. I was part of a church plant that actually met in the YMCA, and the pastor was preaching on Ruth. Not Ruth and Boaz, Ruth. And I want to share with you what I clung to, what Pastor Tim had talked about. Hey, Pastor Tim. So Tim had said, the title of his message was Cling to What is Good. And it was Ruth 1:14 through 17. They lifted up their voices and wept again. And Oprah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people, to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth had said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you. For where you go, I go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, there I will be buried. May the Lord do to me, and more also, if anything to death parts me from you. I don't know about you, but my mother-in-law lives in Marion, Illinois. I do not want to follow my mother-in-law if something happens to pack. You can find me at the beach. You can find me in the mountains in not Colorado, too cold, Tennessee. I don't know that I would want to go to Marion, Illinois. And Ruth followed her mother-in-law after her husband died. And so one thing that Tim kept saying was, cling to what is good. Ruth saw the Lord in Naomi, and she clung to that. And so through this loneliness, I kept saying to myself, cling to what is good. God, what is good? What is good right now? I'm in Oklahoma with good old people who take their time. And I had just come from a path of graduating undergrad and then rushing through grad school to get the most of my education as I possibly could. And I'm in Oklahoma City. And when you go to Walmart, then people want to know, how is your day? It's good, I just had lunch. What did you have? Chicken salad sandwich. Oh my goodness, I love chicken salad. My grandpa makes the best chicken salad sandwich. Getting melt, thank you. Literally, it was so frustrating. I remember calling my mom and saying, oh my good gravy, like people are just saying, they're just good old people that just want to know how you're doing. And it was really frustrating me to slow down. I gained a southern accent while I was there too. But the decision with Ruth was something that I kept clinging to myself. She was all in and following God. God used this relationship to woo Ruth to himself and quite unexpectedly plant her in the genealogy of Christ. It wasn't Naomi's beauty or riches or liveliness that attracted Ruth to her. It was her wisdom and virtue and grace, fruit that God had graciously grown and preserved in Naomi, despite her enormous loss of losing her husband and her 2 sons. Ruth's faithfulness to Naomi was not of her own strength, but in the midst of Naomi's doubt and sorrow, God revealed himself as compassionate. And Naomi believed that God was afflicting her, yet Ruth was able to see that despite the misfortune, God was still for them. And I loved that, and I just clung to that over the next couple months of trying to figure out what in the world am I supposed to do now. Because I can't go back to St. Louis because all my friends are graduating. Half of them are getting married and having babies, and it was just a weird, what am I supposed to do? But I knew that if God could still be for these two ladies after they've lost, Naomi had lost her husband and her two sons, and Ruth had lost her husband, then he could still be for me. My mentor in college was Dr. Wingo, and actually the reason I left a nursing degree and chased psychology was just Dr. Wingo had a lot of the characteristics that Naomi had. Her husband had an affair when I was lifeguarding, and I would watch, I didn't know at the time, I was watching Robert swim back and forth with some woman. No idea that that was his person he had cheated on my mentor. They ended up splitting up, and then he was an FBI agent and was being investigated for embezzlement in Illinois. And he went to the trails. I was an RA, so I had a lot of connections with the police and the communication. He was on the trails by my back apartment and shot himself. Like, if Dr. Wingo can make it through the divorce and her husband publicly killing himself on campus where she worked, I can make it through this. Dr. Wingo can do it, I can do it. Dr. Wingo can do it, I can do it. And one thing, my dad's a retired Air Force pilot. And one thing he always said, and it did not make sense to me until this, I know I'm going to be fine, but how many people can I bring with me along the way? And I think what he means, what I learned through that is it's all about chasing the kingdom and making disciples. I know I'm going to be fine, but how many people can I bring with me on the way? Grace says, everyone become outward focused followers of Jesus. I know I'm going to be fine. How many people can I bring with me? So I moved out of this huge house in Newcastle, Oklahoma. It's actually bigger than what I live in now. Into a one-bedroom apartment in Edmond. I worked for a family, and I did ABA therapy one-on-one with a little boy who was nonverbal, 40 hours a week. And working with a little boy who was nonverbal when I really needed someone to talk to, it's not fun at all. But it was good because I literally found myself praying and talking to him all day long for months. And at some point in time when the paperwork had been processed, my pastor from my college church at Maryville First Baptist in Illinois had called me. It was Fred Winters. I was getting off the highway. I just remember the phone call so clearly. And it would be equivalent of Tim Howie picking up the phone and literally calling you in the middle of a work day. Hey, Mandy, I just heard that Chip left you. I'm so sorry. Do you need anything? I can put my wife on a plane. She'll be there tomorrow. She was my Sunday school teacher for the last half of my years in college. No, Fred, life is good. You know, it's hard, but it's good. It's lonely, but it's good. God's got me. I really wanted to say yes, but I didn't want to cause them expenses. And I remember saying, 23 and divorced, now what? What does it look like to move forward and press through towards a goal that I don't even know? Everything had changed. So during my pit and my valley moments, I tried to cling to the problem. He left me. It's Chip's fault that I hadn't finished my master's degree, 2 of them. 1 class left, and I couldn't find a class that lined up where I could take it. I'm unloved. I'm damaged. I'm not needed in the church. I'm not wanted in the church. You can't use me in the church. There's no way. What am I doing here? Why am I still in Oklahoma City? I had failed at all these things before me. I'm just a failure to others. I'm such a stupid woman for fighting for my marriage for some man who continues to chase all these bimbos around. And all those things were completely partially valid and true. And being brave is hard. Following Christ on the really hard and lonely and boring days is hard because he says, be thankful in all circumstances. Do all things without grumbling or complaining. And I found it really hard to not grumble about not having friends. So in the midst of my tiny apartment, I begged God for a roommate. And I had this neighbor next door in the middle of praying. He was a Cardinals fan, so like we were good buddies, grilled hot dogs a lot together. And he moved, he got a job. Darn it, like the one person I could talk to. And in place of that, a couple moved in. They were not married but living together, and he ended up being an abusive boyfriend of a girl, became my friend. I didn't get a roommate, but I had all the benefits of a roommate without having a roommate. I was so lonely. I spent a week painting my pastor's house. They had just moved, and so I went over to Tim's house and I paint their entire house with them. Because when you're single, you have the flexibility and freedom to stay up and not eat until 11. I would walk through Walmart when I would get off work, working with Nick, literally just looking for someone to talk to me. Because in Oklahoma City, they're good old people. And they all have something to say, but the depths of loneliness was real and legit, and people didn't see it, because we all know how to put on the face of being fine when you've had an argument with your husband on the way to church, or your kids have driven you batty and you walk into church and everything's fine, and we know how to do that, right? So no one knew, and I didn't talk about how lonely and hard this was. I maximized every opportunity I could for someone to talk to me. So I would go to coffee shops, and I'd order my drink, and I'd sit down, and I would read my Bible. I'm not leaving until you talk to me. It's like, coffee's empty. I'm going to go order water. Come back down. Drink the water. I'm going to go back and order a muffin. I was maximizing the opportunity just for someone to make eye contact with me. I worked 3 jobs and hardly slept. And a lot of people told me, oh, well, you know what? You go to the bars, you're so pretty. You'll be fine. You're a sweet young girl. You go to the bars, you're a good dancer, just have some fun. And you'll find a guy in no time. I just remember thinking, I don't know what guys, I don't like bars. I don't like this. I was an RA. I busted parties. I hate the smell of alcohol. So I had a twin bed, and I kept it on my floor, and that was kind of nobody wants to bring a guy over to a twin bed on the floor. So that was kind of my little protective of, okay, I'm going to get to that point. I'm going to protect myself and not get to that point. I'm going to have a bed on the floor. Anyway, the one verse that I continued to tell myself to give myself hope was Psalm 34, verses 4 through 7. I sought the Lord, and he answered me and rescued me from all of my fears. Those who look to him are radiant with joy, and their faces will never be ashamed. This poor man cried out, and the Lord heard him and saved him from all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and rescues them. And along the way, I kept praying, catch me and don't let me fall. Keep me from bitterness. I don't want to explain myself, and I want someone with an A, B, or C last name. Along the way. Preferably an Oklahoma boy. Speak up. So I also prayed for clarity in a very confusing state. My goal and my plan had completely changed. Am I waiting for a guy? Who am I becoming? What am I supposed to do? I was so consumed by fear and comparison, it was almost paralyzing. Help me in the middle, because in the middle did not feel fun and exciting, and I felt very boring. Doing ABA therapy with a little boy who could not talk to me, I felt very forgotten. My friends had moved on and gotten married and were having these sweet little babies. And here I am, left alone and completely in silence. And I felt like when everyone left me in the middle of this re-singleness process, it was really hard. But I had some sense of hope that I would have a Hosea 2 moment and Chip would come riding in on a Jesus horse. I'm so sorry. And it didn't happen. And the Bible has a lot of weird stories in it that I love. And I kind of love studying the weird stories. And one of them that came to me was when my grandpa died in 2006. And I remember being numb still from all the pain, where I was sad because my mom had lost her dad. And she had lost her mom, Neva, when she was 9. And so now here she is losing her dad, who I just adored him. And so I spoke at his funeral, and you could have heard a pin drop because it was the, oh my gosh, Mandy's there. Oh my gosh, did you know she left her? Oh my God. Like, it was just, it was weird and awkward and not fun. It's my family. I couldn't afford counseling. So I asked God, hey, you gave me a degree, and you have your Bible, and you're the ultimate counselor. Counsel me through this. And so I read and studied Psalm 23 a lot. And I don't know why it is the funeral scripture, because it's about a hard journey. Psalm 23 reads, "The Lord is my shepherd, I have what I need. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He renews my life. He leads me along the right paths, and for his name's sake. Even when I go through the darkest valley, I fear no danger, for you are with me. Your rod and staff, they comfort me. In the middle of this fire, what is your will for me? In the middle of this 23 and divorced, now what? What's next?" And I think this is a better example that's seen than heard. And so I brought a little example here. So, in the middle of divorce, in the middle of financial stress, he has prepared this table for us in the presence of your enemies, which is really weird, because who likes to sit around people who are whispering about you, who are attacking you, who are attacking your kids, sitting at a volleyball game? Oh my gosh, did you hear what your husband did? It's there. But somehow, God has prepared this table in the middle of our enemies, not at the beach, our enemies. In the middle of depression and financial stress, work pressure, cancer, mental illness, family turmoil, it's all legit. Struggling with being a stay-at-home mom, it's legit. It's not talked about. Being in the middle, this is not a fun conversation. We don't want to talk about this. And I didn't talk about it. I put it in my back pocket. Facebook wasn't as big then. And so our God, understanding the greatness of our God in the middle of our enemies, is what the focus of the scripture is. And one thing that this is what he had taught me was the enemy is real, and he prowls around daily, looking for someone to devour and attack. And he's going to attack our character, a weakness in our marriage, something in us to get at us so we don't get to the table with our Father. And I'll say something like this: "You're not good enough. You're just a divorced girl. You don't even have your degree. You got more credits than you needed. You need 35, you got 42. You don't even have a degree. Can't get to anything with a bachelor's in psychology, just to let you know. You're not even worth it. You're not qualified. Everyone is against you. Nobody is for you." And that's what the enemy will say. But your job, my job, was to sit down at the table and to lock eyes with our Father. Thank you, God, for singleness. Thank you, God, for providing for me. I make $12 an hour, and somehow I'm able to afford my apartment and my brand new house. Apartment, brand new car. Thank you for leading me. The enemy does not have a table, a seat at my table. And that's when I focused on the promises of God and not the problem of singleness and the problem of divorce and the problem of the finances. $12 an hour doesn't really get much. And I had to disengage from a lot of my friends and really bring people to my table who reinforced what my Father was telling me. So Doris Haynes, she's in her 80s, became my best friend. I almost moved in with her. It was my pastor's mother. She was awesome. And so many times when it was awful and lonely and surrounded very loudly in the presence of my enemies, God says, "Watch me sustain you. Watch me lead you. Watch me lead my daughter through this fire." And that's what he says to all of us, no matter what it is. So what is the battle cry of the Lord? What does God promise in this time? Well, Paul says to forget what is behind and reaching forward to what is ahead. to pursue my goal and the prize promised from God's Heavenly Father in Christ Jesus. Psalm 46 says, God is in the midst of her being the church. God is in the midst of her, she shall not be moved. God will heal her in the morning. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay every weight aside in which sin clings so closely. Let us run with endurance with the race set before us, looking into Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, for the joy has been set before him, and he who endured the cross, despising the shame, is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. The Lord will fight for you. You only need to be still. For I am the Lord your God who holds your right hand, who says to you, do not fear, I will help you. He gives strength to the faint, and strengthens the powerless. But those who trust in the Lord will renew their strength and soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not become weary, and they will walk and not be faint. And know that all things work together for the good of those that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. The Lord is my helper, I am not afraid. What can man do to me? The Lord rescued me from every evil work, bringing me safely into this heavenly kingdom. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And so therefore, let us come boldly to the throne of grace, that we may obtain mercy and grace and help in time of need. I'm at rest in God alone. My salvation comes from him alone is my rock, my salvation, my stronghold. I will never be shaken. Cast your burden on him, for he sustains you. He will never allow the righteousness to be shaken. For the Lord has not given us a spirit of fear, but one of power and love and sound judgment. And one of the last words that Jesus said when he came back and before he went into heaven for the second time. All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always. And one thing I kept trying to remember was, in the midst of this, he has given me a new song, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see what he has done and be amazed. In the middle of the brokenness, people would see what he has done. The enemies fall at the song of the glory of God. But why are we in the presence of our enemies? Because that's really annoying and frustrating and hard. And so God can get the full glory. In the middle of the fight, I said, get me out of here. Take me back to St. Louis. Get me back to my friends. Get me back to where my parents will eventually move. Get me out of Oklahoma City. And God said, no, get me in there. When 3 go into the fire, there are 4. And there are so many stories in the Bible that just talk about God being in the midst of the fire. Watch me sustain you. Watch me overflow your cup is what Psalm 23 ends at. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Only goodness and faithfulness will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord as long as I live. So Christmas came around, and it was a little easier because I could look back through the pain and see how God had counseled me through wedding photography. Healing from a divorce through wedding photography. Within a year, I had shot 50 plus weddings. Every weekend I was shooting a wedding and worked with another photographer. My favorite wedding was the Anderson wedding, and it was downtown Oklahoma City. And I remember the groom came out and goes, I do not want pictures with my ham sandwiches. Put the camera down and sit. I'd sit with my family. This is a wedding. It's just a wedding. The table prepared for me was I had coffee at every single coffee shop in Oklahoma City, because you can do that when you're single. Every single one became a battleground for me, where God had spoken to me. And the people at my table were Doris. And it was awesome. After church, the awkwardness of leaving by myself, she always invited me over for lunch, and her husband was an awesome cook. So it was really cool to hang out with them all Sunday. My cup overflows. There was a pastor at Journey Church who saw me and gave me an opportunity to serve. and I took off with it. They trusted me with the part of the ministry. They never held divorce over my head as something that held me back. And so I always got there to church early and stayed late. I mentored the junior and senior girls that were in college there. We flipped this barn into a worship venue, very similar to this. And it was me and a bunch of guys, because a lot of girls didn't want to tear down walls and paint, and that really excited me. But it was so fun to know that barn was flipped for OU campus, and it was in the middle of, and it was really close to the OU campus where they continuously brought students in to worship. My mom's back went out in August, and they were in the middle of moving from North Carolina to Colorado, and I was able to drop everything and go help them move. Literally, she was in the back of a pickup truck, physically could not move, ended up having back surgery. Really awful, really painful. And when school started, I took a position in alternative school, working with students from the city who had been kicked out of school for drug sales or they had beat up a teacher. It was super intimidating. But I was able to look back and smile a little and then use my story of loneliness and hurt and pain and really a lot of, it's not fair, I did everything right, for strength. So I finally started going through some of my boxes and throwing away some college pictures that had Chip in it. And I came across this birthday card from Joellen. I was like, God, why did I save this? Like, trash, like all this stuff. I had a really weird dream that night that I was in my old church and some lady was talking to Joellen, who was one of my Sunday school teachers. I said, hey, I've got a guy for you. And she said, or for your son. And she said, all my sons but one will marry a photographer. So Mike Carricker called around January and said, hey, how are you? How are you doing? He's the youth pastor from that church. Oh, I'm good. I'm working as a counselor in an alternative school, selling weed every day at 7 a.m., breaking up gang fights in my high heels. Life's good. He said, hey, I need a counselor. Can you come back for a weekend? We're having a youth retreat. And we need a women counselor to interview if something happens in the middle of the night. Sure, I'll drive 8 hours to do that for you and stay up all night with kids. And I loved it. I prayed the whole time, but it was hard because I tried so many times to go back to St. Louis, and so here I was coming back to St. Louis for the first time in a year, over a year, where it wasn't Mandy and Chip, which had become the identity. It was Mandy, the left one, the lost one, the forgotten one. So I remember I was fine. I literally prayed all 8 hours. I was totally fine, and then I saw St. Louis is older and has a lot of cathedral, beautiful Catholic churches, and as soon as I got downtown and you just see one Catholic church after the other, it was an ugly cry. And Psalm 23 came to my mind. I will sustain you. I will hold you. I will lead you. I got you. I did this. You listened. You're not broken. No one had seen me in a while, and it was true. It was really neat. And so I was on my last day of this Daniel fast, and I'd been hanging out with the senior girls in the kitchen of Jim and Joellen's house. We're just punching around with the girls. They were talking about, oh, I want to be a missionary in Africa. And then they were talking, oh my gosh, I just love your boys. They're so hot. He has such good cheekbones. I was like, oh my gosh. You know, you're not going to find a good look at Josh Anderson cheekbones when you're in Africa. And then I turned to my right, and on the only thing on their fridge was a thank you card from Matt and Shannon. I said, Joellen, how old are your boys now? She's like, oh, Matt just got married to Shannon. She's a photographer. Josh is in college, and Pat is a teacher. What? Pat is the middle son, and I thought he was in high school. We had never crossed paths. We had all the same best friends. We had never crossed paths. I ran out of that house like the third monkey trying to get on the ark. It was awkward. I was like, I'm done. Because I suddenly remembered all my boys but one will marry a photographer. It's like, that was a weird dream. What your sense my name? I know. I gotta go to the senior boys now and take pictures. But it ended up being a great visit. I came back and the girls and I hung out and talked until like 2 in the morning. Went back to Oklahoma, and life was good. Kept working at Journey. And anyway, on March 9th is where things really started to change. A gunman walked into Maryville First Baptist Church and shot Pastor Fred. And I get a text from a friend of mine who was laying under the pew, literally said, "Pray and do not stop praying. This is not a joke. Fred has been shot. Our church is in lockdown." And so a gunman had walked into the church and literally just opened fire on Pastor Fred. And Tim kind of reminds me of him sometimes because Fred would preach really close to the edge, and all the college students sat over here. And so he kept saying, he's going to stage dive. So that was, the college students were right there. And the first bullet went to his Bible, and it went up in a lot of pieces, but the second bullet, as he was jumping off, hit his heart. And that was hard. It was like I just relived everything, all the pain all over again. And I had 3 phone calls that day from people who hadn't seen or talked to me in almost 2 years then. "Mandy, it's time to come home. Maybe it's time to come home. We need you." And so I knew in my heart it was time to go back to St. Louis. And I packed up my car, and I found someone to take over my lease, and found someone to take my job, and went back to St. Louis and worked in the church for free for 2 months, just kind of as that waiting period as they were healing. I worked with a youth group and worked under the youth pastor to help him prepare for the summer. So in this middle of this sinless, selfless life, Christ went to die in a garbage dump. And I knew that outrageous obedience was better than sacrifice, because I had started to like Oklahoma. And my southern accent I had gotten. And if God had the ability to reach down from heaven and bring a Hosea 2 moment in my life, I was still willing. But I wasn't going to let that stop me from serving. God, in his infinite power and love, had the ability to just change. And he had the ability to reach down and grab Jesus off the cross, and he didn't. He was there in the middle of Christ's pain, and I kept clinging to that. Cling to what is good. God is always at work. He's always at work for his glory. And through the middle, may we follow through Ruth's footsteps and cling to what is good. If he can pick me up off my kitchen floor after crying for 6 hours straight, I have no doubt that he can meet us in our living room in the middle of our pain. If he can use my middle, on my 1-year anniversary, one of my students came to me, "What's wrong with your tongue?" It was like purple right in the middle. So he had gotten in a gang fight and bit it, and he bruised his tongue. I said, "Nana, I have the craziest story for you. So I was in this fight last night." "Chris, come on." "Yeah, I left my house, but it's okay. It's a good thing I wasn't there because there was a bullet hole through my house, and it would have hit me if I would have been in the house. So I was out and I was fighting, and I totally lost. But these guys ganged up on me." "Chris, this is not how you're, Chris, like this is," I ended up sharing the gospel with him. And the next day, it happened to be on the 1-year anniversary. He got real scared and he knew kind of the apartment where I lived. And he walked into a church and walked right into the youth pastor's office, not knowing who he was talking to. And that youth pastor led him to Christ. A lady I had worked with had watched me through all this. And she said, "Man, you just stood up so tall, and I just couldn't believe it. God just used you. You weren't," "Yeah, Lisa." You didn't see all the tears, but yeah. She ended up moving from the middle of Oklahoma closer to her kids and stopped chasing the men in the bars. She was my one who would say, "Oh, you get so many good guys in the bar." Totally rededicated her life to Jesus and moved closer to her kids to step up and be a mom. If he can bring restoration to those relationships, his love still remains and still prevails. I know I'm going to be fine. So how many people can I bring with me along the way? Although I couldn't see the end of the season, I could see and read and feel the product of the Word of God and cling to the promises, not the problem. He gives us a life example that's lived out for us to follow, and he gives us a book to constantly refer back to it. Trust the promise when you're in the middle, not the problem. So God is insanely in love with us. He chooses for us to be his hands and feet. May I always remember that I am nothing but a servant of the Lord, and through the pain, there's going to be more middle battles. Through the pain, he calls me to serve and love others, and through it, he will work in his wisdom He is the warrior. We just need to be still. So there's praise in the middle, and there's prayer in the middle. And we've been talking all semester. We've had our sticky notes on the back. In the very first meeting, a sticky note prayer that said, I have a really important doctor's appointment tomorrow. Will you pray for me? Yes. So we're going to hear from someone here who is in the middle of her journey. And I hope and pray that we continue to be those that surround her with prayer. If you guys will welcome Marisa. Yay!
Thank you guys for letting me come speak to you today. I also just wanted to thank you for the support that you've given me. I know you all have been praying for me and my family in an obviously really tough time. So many people texted or support us in other ways through food and things. And I really appreciate it more than I can say, so thank you.
All right,
Start with my story.
You're good. You want to start with step to the line, or? Okay.
So I just want to give you guys some background on how things happened to me and kind of the timeline of what's been going on in my life since I last was here. As Mandy said, this all happened right before our first meeting. It was the night before. It was a Sunday night, and I was laying in bed, and I just happened to feel a lump in my breast. I had not been doing self-breast exams, which I will probably remind you guys multiple times to be doing, because it's very important that you find these things early. So that's kind of my first praise to God, that He allowed me to feel the lump, just because. So the next day, I came to our first meeting. I called my gynecologist to set up an appointment and see them, and had it set for the next day, Tuesday. And it was just hard to focus. I was trying to tell myself that things were going to be okay. It was no big deal. The odds are that it's nothing. But I was pretty worried. And so, as Mandy said, that was obviously my prayer request. I almost didn't write it down because I didn't want to admit that there was something going on, and just wanted to be private about it. But I did. Another thing that happened that day that you guys may remember if you were here was we had a circle exercise where basically it was like if you've ever had this happen to you, step forward. I can't remember the exact way we did it, but one of the questions was if you've ever had cancer, then go ahead and step forward. There were a lot of us here that day, and I remember looking around and not one person stepped forward. And God was telling me at that moment that I was going to be the first one. I think even in my head I knew that lump was there and that it was going to be something that He used, and that I was going to be the first woman that went through that. So I think even at that time He was preparing me for what was ahead of me. Went to my gynecologist the next day. They felt the lump. They reassured me it was probably a cyst and nothing to worry about, but luckily sent me for an ultrasound and mammogram. With both of those, they still thought that it was probably benign. There wasn't anything specific with that led them to breast cancer diagnosis. But they still recommended that I get a biopsy. So I did that, went in for the biopsy, still feeling pretty good about things, feeling certain that, it'll be okay, I'm young, I'm healthy, I don't have any risk factors for breast cancer, it doesn't run in my family, and I've been taking care of myself. So there were a long couple of weeks in between, about 10 days after the biopsy before I heard anything. And I got a call on October 3rd that I'll never forget for the rest of my life. I know where I was, what I was doing, and got the call that I had cancer, that the lump returned as invasive breast cancer. So I have a lot to say about that, but from there, I met with an oncologist. They knew that I would require chemotherapy. So I started 4 rounds of chemotherapy. It was supposed to be 6 rounds, but after I made it through the 4th round, they found that the tumor was not shrinking and was not responding to the chemotherapy regimen that they had me on. And typically there is a good response to that chemo. So at that point, I had a really dark time, which I'll tell you guys a little bit about, but just didn't know what God was going to do. So I ended up meeting with my oncologist again. I went to MD Anderson in Texas for a second opinion, and they felt like I needed to proceed immediately to surgery to remove the tumor and try to get rid of the cancer, since we didn't know what was going on and why the chemotherapy wasn't working. So I had a double mastectomy on February 6th. They were able to remove all the cancer. They tested my lymph nodes, so they take out all the lymph nodes that are around the tumor to see if there's any cancer cells in them. I had 6 lymph nodes surrounding my tumor, and they were all negative for cancer. So they were able to remove the entire tumor and everything with it. At this point, I'm still very much in the middle of my battle. Because the tumor did not respond to chemo, they wanted to do more, which feels weird because right now the cancer should be gone. But the goal for the rest of my life is to make sure that it doesn't come back. So for the next 50 years of my life, that's always going to be a possibility of a recurrence. So obviously, to make sure that that doesn't happen and to be here for my children as they grow up, I'm going to do 4 more rounds of chemotherapy. I start a week from today. It's a more intense chemo than what I did before, so I'm definitely feeling pretty nervous right now. But God's gotten me this far, and He has blessed me, and He has really helped me to persevere through this well. And so I believe that He will continue to do that. And so my last chemotherapy is April 16th, hopefully. And then from there, I'll be doing shots and pills and that sort of thing for the next several years of my life to keep the recurrence risk low. So again, God provided for me and allowed me to find this lump early. And He's really provided for me every step of the way. So ladies, make sure that you know your bodies. Make sure that if you feel like something is ever wrong, doesn't feel right, even if you think you're too young, you're too healthy, get it checked out. Make sure you stay on top of yourself and your self-care. Even when life's busy now with little kids, it's hard to do that sometimes.
And for you, one thing that stuck out for me is you're in the medical field. Here you are, patient.
Yeah, that's very, it's interesting. I am a physician, and so I've been with people, obviously, that have had serious illnesses and cancer before. And the field that I'm in now, we actually are developing new drugs, and a lot of those are for cancer patients. And one of the studies we're doing now, the participants are getting a drug that I am now receiving as a patient. And so it's interesting how God uses your past to sometimes help with your future, and how it's made me a more empathetic person now that I've been through it. I think that as a physician, you want the best for people, but until you've actually walked that road, it's really hard to know what they're going through.
So tell me about the last 5 months. How have you grown? How has this impacted your family, your husband? Big question.
Yeah, it's a very broad. So I guess I'll just start with, I mentioned to you guys that there was a week that was really hard for me. So my 4th round of chemotherapy was the day after Christmas. It was December 26th. I was supposed to have 2 more rounds after that, but that's when they discovered that the tumor wasn't shrinking. I had an MRI, and it was the same size that it was when we started. And my oncologist, I talked with him, and he didn't really know what to do next. He wanted to take my case to something called a tumor board, where they have a lot of physicians there to look at what's going on and kind of give their input of what they think should happen. And it was the darkest week of my life, and it was the week between Christmas and New Year's Eve, when a lot of people are celebrating and things are happy. And I have never been so low, so scared, so feeling alone, and just not knowing where God was, and wondering how He was going to provide for me in that time, and how He was going to pull me through it. And so, I also had just had chemo, so I felt really bad. I felt terrible. I was in bed, I couldn't get up. I couldn't see my friends like I normally do. I couldn't be with my children and play with them. I couldn't do all the holiday things. And at that point, I had to surrender my life to God. And I would say that I've done that before. I've been a Christian for a long time, but I don't know that I have fully surrendered my life, my will, and my desires to Him. And at that time, I had no other choice. All I could do is give it to Him. I've always been somebody who wants to hold on to control. I know the plan that I had, I was going to do this and this and this in my life, and I could take care of the things I needed to, and I didn't need help, and quite frankly, I didn't really need God because I could figure it all out. And so the first thing He taught me then was we don't have control of our lives. Ultimately, He is the one who guides us, who leads us, and so I learned to surrender all of that to Him, to surrender the control to Him. And anxiety, it's impossible not to be anxious when you don't know if your life is, if it's still going to be your life. If you're going to be leaving behind your children and your husband and you don't know what comes next. And so as I surrendered to God, He met me in that place in a way that I didn't know was possible, in a way that I didn't know that He could. And He, as I surrendered, He spoke to my heart. I wanted to share a verse that He gave me that has gotten me through a lot of those low times. And it's 1 Peter 5:10-11. And it says, "But may the God of all grace, who called us to His eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after you have suffered a while, perfect, establish, strengthen, and settle you. To Him be the glory and the dominion forever and ever." So I clung to that. I knew I was suffering, and I clung to the phrase that I would suffer for a while, and it wasn't going to be forever. That there would be an end to this darkness, to this fear, and that He would make me stronger, and He would strengthen me, and through His power, He would settle me. And by His grace, He did. I dealt with the anxiety, and He gave me peace. He gave me a lot of peace, and told me to turn everything over to Him and allow Him to be in charge. And He was good. He was really good to me in that time. I also wanted to share a little bit from a book that I've read. It's called Calm My Anxious Heart by Linda Dillow. And if you guys have dealt with anxiety for any reason, whether it's a physical thing you're going through or a friend that has, a mentor here at Grace gave it to me, and it spoke to me in that time. I read most of the book that week, and one of the parts of the book talks about, I don't have it in front of me, but basically how when, so it was when the Israelites were going out of Egypt and they came to the Red Sea. And there's one small verse in there where it says, basically all through the night, God worked. In the night when they couldn't see what God was doing, and they didn't know how He was going to deliver them from their enemies' hands, He was working. And as they were sleeping and wondering if their lives would continue, if their children would be murdered and killed, God was pushing back the Red Sea. And they didn't know that. They didn't know what He was doing in that time. But when morning came, the Red Sea had parted, and He had provided a way for them to move forward in safety in His hand. And all I could think during that time was, in the darkness, when I couldn't see what He was doing, when I didn't know what His purpose was, He was still working. And that when I came out of that time, out of the anxiety, out of the confusion, out of the unknown, He was doing something for me. And guys, He was. He really was. And so, have hope that if you're in a dark time and you don't know how He's weaving your story together, He's got a purpose and He's got a plan for you. And there is something mighty that He can do in your life through those dark times.
So you shared something with me that I thought was interesting. I think part of walking through and letting control go was allowing others to be a part of your story. When you're physically not able to care for your kids as you're walking through chemo, how did God show up on the hard days through others, whether they're sitting in this room or others in the church?
So like day in and day out, God has showed up and people have showed up. From things as far as, my friends checking in frequently with text messages, how are you doing? I'm praying for you. What are your specific prayer requests? To people showing up with food at my doorstep almost every day, to people sending gifts or letters, or I had a friend from college I haven't seen in a decade. She crocheted a blanket for me, and while she was crocheting, she prayed for me that entire time, and it showed up at my doorstep. But there's hundreds of things like that God has done and has allowed people to put their arms around me and help me to feel supported, encouraged, and taken care of in that time. And one thing that I want to say is if you have a friend going through a dark time, you know that they're struggling, I would say don't feel nervous to reach out to them. I think sometimes people want to make sure they have the exact right thing to say, and they want to make sure they don't say something wrong, or they're not really sure what to do and they don't want to bother you. For me, and everybody may not be this way, but I think that I would say don't worry about it. If you feel like God's telling you to send that text or that letter or bring the meal, do it. And know that He's going to use that. And even if the person that's going through the trial, they don't text back, they aren't able to say thank you, know that when you did it, you encouraged them and you supported them. So if you're doing it out of love and you're doing it without expectation, they will appreciate it. So I would really encourage you to do that. He is also, He's shown me how real prayer is. Like, God has shown me how much it can change. I have physically felt Him surround me in times because of prayer. So if you ever feel like your prayers aren't working or aren't doing anything, they are. One thing that was amazing, the day of my surgery, it was cold, it was dark, I had to get to the hospital at 5:45 in the morning, and I was frankly terrified. I didn't know how the surgery would go, I didn't know what they would find, I didn't know what recovery would look like. And I checked in, I gave them my name, and I went to sit down, and a man stood up, and he said, "Are you Marisa?" I said, "Yeah, who are you?" And he said, "Well, I'm from Grace Church, and I came to pray with you before you go into surgery." And I just cried when I think about it. It was early, guys. He probably got there at 5:30 in the pitch black, in the dark, and he didn't know me. He doesn't know my family. But he was there. Like, he was there to be the hands and feet of God. And, they say that a cord of three is not easily broken. And my husband, and his name's Tony, I later found out I need to still meet him again and thank him. But, and me, the three of us sat down and we prayed together, and he prayed over us. And there were three of us coming to God at that point and asking Him to intervene. And that's the way my day started. And to be honest, a day that was scary turned out to be probably one of the best days of my life, if not the best. And God provided through that prayer. Another way He provided through prayer was, as Mandi was saying, I wrote on that sticky note that I needed prayer. And of all people, Mandi ended up being the one who got that note. And she can probably share a little bit more, but she figured out, I think in January, several months later, put two and two together and figured out that was me. And so we were just like awed and laughing at God's goodness, because she's like, "I was praying for you twice every day. I was praying for you because I knew you as Marisa, that you had cancer, and I was praying for you because you were the person on the sticky note and I didn't know it was you." So like, God just works together for good in prayer, and He really provides in amazing ways.
That's so true. And I think sometimes when I see my friends or a neighbor going through something, I think, gosh, money's just tight. Like, I don't know what I can buy. Like, I can't buy them a bunch of stuff. I don't know how to support them. And then I was just reminded the other day when we were chatting, when you said the biggest way that God showed up on that day was Tony showed up in the waiting room to pray. And for me, prayer is free, and it takes up nothing. I mean, it's just such a great reminder for me of the least I can do is the best thing I can do, and that's to pray.
Right, because I think sometimes we don't give that the power that it has, and that's something that we're all able to do, and it really makes a difference.
And One thing, so as we were talking the other day, I was just reminded that courage in the face of a storm is so courageous. And I was just so inspired just by chatting with you. And you had a really good Friday night.
Yes. So when I started this whole process or journey, I'll call it, on October 3rd, I felt like I needed a way to outlet or journal what I was dealing with. So I'm not a big social media person. I'm also a pretty private person. I don't like to share what I'm going through and what I'm feeling, and that's always been tough for me. So I opened a random Instagram account without my name on it. I kept it private, and every day I just kind of wrote a little bit of what I was feeling, what I was learning, what I was going through. And about a month into that, I felt like God told me to make it public. I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't tell my friends. I told my husband. He made up a random name and followed me. But I just put it out there. And I thought, if I'm going through this, maybe there's other people going through this. So, I would tack things on it, like breast cancer, young breast cancer, and hoping other people would have things to offer as well. So throughout the next couple of months, I've met a lot of amazing strangers on Instagram that have been through what I have, and I've been chronicling my journey. So like Mandi was referring to, on the day of surgery, again, February 6th, I posted a silly picture and a song. So God's really spoken to me through worship songs. Time and time again, the song I needed has come on the radio at just the right time to lift me up and to give me hope. And so I posted a song by Mandi Marisa. It's called Unfinished, and basically just our lives are unfinished and that God's still working on us and that we're his masterpiece. And so I posted that, and I tagged Mandi Marisa thinking, whatever, like she'll never know or care, like this will just sit here and that's totally fine. So I did that before I went into surgery. So the morning of surgery, I'm holding my husband's hand. They're starting to put me to sleep, and I'm just bawling. Like, I'm crying tears of fear, of anticipation, of doubt, of worry. And I didn't want to let go of his hand, but I did, and luckily I fell asleep, in 10 seconds. But while I was sleeping, while I was in a slumber, unaware of anything going on in the world, while the surgeons were working on me, and doing their best work on me and removing my cancer, like God was doing amazing things that I didn't know about. As I started to wake up from surgery, I was still asleep. My eyes were still closed. I couldn't open them. I was so tired. But my husband was there holding my hand again. And I just said, how did it go? What happened? And he said, they got it all. They got all your cancer, and they checked all your lymph nodes, and they were all negative. He's like, honey, that's what we've been praying for. And I just had tears rolling down my face again, and this time it was out of joy for the work that he had done in my life. He squeezed my hand. He said, and also, Mandisa reposted your post on her page. And I was like, oh my God, she's got like 200,000 followers or whatever, and I've got 20. Mandisa reposted it, and she asked people to pray for me. She asked that people lift me up during my surgery. So while I was asleep, and I had no idea what was going on, thousands of people were lifting me up to our Father and were asking on my behalf for my healing. And he did, guys. He did heal me in that time. So I woke up, and I sent her a message to thank her, and I wrote another post with all of my good news, and she retweeted or reposted that one as well, and said, look at what God has done in the family of believers to pray for someone that you don't know. And she referenced the song Bleed the Same, if you guys have heard that, but we're all in this together, no matter our backgrounds, our walks, in Christ, we are family. And she reposted that. And so I thanked her again, and she wrote back, and looked up Mandi online, and 2 weeks later she was coming to Kansas City. Just the way that God works in the details. I was uncertain if I'd be able to go. I didn't know what my surgery recovery would be like. But God was good to me, and I had some drains, and they got removed very quickly, and I've recovered very well. So I bought the tickets, and I said, hey, I'm coming to see you. And she's like, that's awesome. Like, I'd love to meet you. So on Friday night, I went to the Toby Mac Hits Deep concert. It was amazing. And I went backstage and I met Mandisa. And we chatted and I shared my story with her. And she prayed over me. Like, she touched my shoulders and she said my name and she knew what I was going through and she prayed for me. And she just is the kindest, warmest, friendliest, happiest person in the world. And there happened to be another woman in the room whose husband was just diagnosed with cancer the week before. And she just thanked God that I was able to provide hope. So even when you think, like, I'm still in the middle of this journey, like, what can I offer to somebody? I was a little further in the journey ahead of her, and I was able to tell her, you know, it's okay. Like, you can trust in God, and you can give these fears to Him. And I hope, I don't know, but I hope that the words I spoke then helped her. So, yeah, that was pretty cool.
She's got a really cool name. So I just love, and I can talk about my divorce 10 years post without crying because the emotions have been removed and I've just seen it's come full circle and I've seen the goodness. I didn't talk about it in the middle, and I wish I would have had somebody. So I love that you are able to share the middle of hard days and good days. And so I want to use you as an example for Psalm 23. So if we can do this real quick. You can have a seat over here. Yes, you can go. So if you're wearing pink, stand up and surround the table real quick. Have a seat. So I was just reminded as I was praying, we've worn pink and we've prayed so often, and so often it feels so exhausting and alone, and I just pictured going into that hospital room and seeing Tony. And I think so often we are at the table and feeling alone and surrounded by our enemies, and whatever enemy that might be. And it might be an IEP meeting and somebody who is not treating your children the way that you know that your children deserve. And then you look around and you're like, I'm surrounded by my enemies. But really, surrounding our enemies are those that are praying with us. And it's the angel armies. And so when we wore pink that one day, it was in December, I just love that picture because God's going to get glory, and people, the enemies, will fall right here. Like I just loved that. So I was preparing. I just thought about that. Like, we need to surround her with pink. Just a visual reminder: you're not alone, and you're not the only one walking through a journey in here. So I have a friend. Another sticky note that I got. I'm really good at figuring out who sticky notes are. Do you want to share? The joy of being a former social worker, HR person. I know all.
All right, so Mandy did kind of put a little bug in my ear that this would be happening. I guess, should I sit? Okay. So just with her talking about being in the middle, I've been through this journey the past year and a half where I've been feeling stuck in the middle, not knowing where God's leading me, not hearing from Him, not knowing what's going to happen. So a year and a half ago, my husband and I decided to start trying again for a second child. I have one daughter named Rain. Some of you have met her. She'll be 3 in a couple weeks. And so a year and a half ago, she was about a year and a half, so we're like, okay, you know, our kids will be about 2 years apart. This is great. And growing up, I had a very naive perspective of like sex and pregnancy. So I thought, oh, you just do it once or twice and then boom, you're good to go. That has not been my experience. And so I actually, the past year and a half, have had 2 confirmed miscarriages, and then I believe another one, just because I've been through 3 confirmed because I had one before my daughter. And so I've just been in this, I had been in this period where I'm just like, God, I don't know why this is happening. I don't know why this is so hard. I never imagined that it would be so hard because not only are you were we waiting for another child, but you're going through this loss. And if you've been through it, you know how just how hard it can be. And just I felt so lonely. You just have to kind of put on a brave face. If you're at work, you're not going to be breaking down every 2 seconds. So it was very lonely. And I went through periods where I blamed myself. I don't know why, it sounds kind of silly, but you start trying to find answers, and then you start looking at yourself like, okay, did I do everything I should have? And my cousin, she knew about the miscarriages, but she didn't know about me blaming myself. And she's like, I just feel like I heard this word from the Lord that this is not your fault. And I was like, and she's like, she started crying. Of course, I started crying. She's like, the enemy is trying to scam you and make you believe that this is your fault. And so I just encourage you, if you're ever in a place or you are currently where you're taking false responsibility that's not your fault, I just encourage you to pray that God brings that to light. Because if you're already going through a hard time and then on top of it you're blaming yourself, it just can be unbearable. And so God lifted that from me, just confirmation, like, this is not your fault, it's nothing you've done. And so I think Marissa said, she mentioned the power of prayer. And I think I'll be honest, sometimes I underestimate the power of prayer, and I'm like, oh, he knows what I'm thinking, like, whatever. He knows my thoughts, so he knows what I want. But this verse that just kept coming to my mind is like, ask and it'll be given to you. Seek and you'll find it. Knock and the door will be open. I'm like, okay, well, this is what your scripture said. So there's got to be power in literally saying it and asking. So I didn't stop asking. I was just like, okay, God, I want a child, And so we considered adoption, but we didn't think that would be until way down the road. And so we just wanted to make sure we were doing what God wanted us to do. And so so I finally got to the point where I was like, God, I don't know if I can handle another miscarriage. And so I just prayed, and and it feels weird telling God something you don't want. I feel weird doing that because I'm like, you're God, and I don't believe he causes those things, but I think he uses those things. And so I was like, God, I got to a point where I was like, God, please, I just pray that you just tell me what to do. Do you want me to wait? Do you want us to adopt? I just pray that, please, I don't think I can handle another miscarriage. And so as of today, I'm 13 weeks pregnant. Thank you. And so we've had an ultrasound, there's a heartbeat, and there's movement, and so everything's looking really good. And so I'm kind of coming out the other side of being stuck in the middle. And I know that God answers in different ways for everyone, but I put my sticky note up there saying, I've had several miscarriages. I've talked to some of you about it, and there's been a lot of prayer that's gone into this. So I just thank you, and there is so much power in prayer. So yeah.
So I found this when I was cleaning. At the same week, I got your sticky note. I was like, I'm saving that for Jen. I know all handwriting. So I just want to encourage, continue to talk, continue to pray. And we're not going to do sticky notes this week. We're going to do something a little different. And if you are journeying through something right now where 80 women can surround you in prayer, would you be willing to share? But also be willing to share on the other side when God has moved mountains and when he has calmed your heart and when he has shown up on the dark days. Remember that that's a part of your story. But will you allow us to pray for you? And whatever it might be. It might not be cancer. Maybe it is an IEP meeting. Maybe it is a teacher that's beaten down on your kid and just really not being in a healthy spot. Maybe it's the mental health diagnosis. Mitchell and I are kind of related, but not really. We lived in Japan together when I was in the military. My dad was in the military. And I've asked him to come lead us in worship. Not first, if there's someone else that we can pray for.
I'm struggling a lot with fear. I have a lot of anxiety. I have an OCD diagnosis, and I'm really having some really bad anxiety and fear going on. is transitioning jobs, and it's been a difficult couple years, and it still is, but just prayer for our financial heart. Charlotte, do you want to pray? I think I just know this question.
God, thank you, first of all, for being God, that you are sovereign, you are powerful, and your love is incredible. God, thank you for loving us through all the crap that we put ourselves through, for the silly things that we do, for going back to things that we've left behind. Thank you for loving us through the things that we don't do that hit us, whether it be miscarriages, or cancer, or anxiety, the things that the world, Satan, and just life throw at us. God, thank you for being sovereign even in those moments when it feels like things are out of control. God, thank you for loving us, for putting us in this group, a group of moms who've all walked through some stuff together. We all know, probably most of us, a lot of us know about going through a miscarriage, or going through difficult times with our spouses, not knowing what to do with our kids, feeling the anxiety and the stress, the financial burdens. God, thank you that we're not alone, that you've put us in this community together. Help us to remember that we are not alone. We have these group of women, we have this church or other churches that other ladies are a part of. Thank you. But most of all, thank you that we have you. And that you're not just a God that is up there watching what's going on and doesn't really care, but you are here. Thank you that your presence, your spirit is here with us. Thank you for the tangible ways that you will reveal yourself. Lord, I specifically pray for Stacey, that you would comfort her, that you would remove this anxiety, that you would help her to walk boldly and confidently in knowing that you are providing in ways that she doesn't even know about. Lord, I pray for Laura, her husband, that you would provide financially, that you would do a miracle work, that you would even comfort her in those lonely times. I know that as a traveling husband it's difficult. That you would sustain her in those times. But this is Jen, thank you. Thank you for this precious life that you brought inside of her. I pray that more than just a physical surrounding, that you would surround this precious child, that you would help everything to develop and grow perfectly. There would be no complications, and that she will be able to praise and shout your name, the goodness that you've done in her life. Continue to walk through this journey with us, and you will continue to bring healing, and that the cancer will not come back. Just put a wall there on her body that no cancer, no sickness, nothing that's going to wreck her will come through because you are God. Lord, I just pray for a special blessing for their marriages, for their financial situations, for children. God, that you would sustain, you would turn to you and not, it's good to have friendships, it's good to have that's so vital, but we will turn to you first. That you would be the glory. We praise you, Jesus.
Before I spoke a word, you were singing over me. You have been so, so good to me. Before I took a breath, you breathed your life in me. so kind to me. And oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't turn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. I was your foe, still your love. You have been so good to me. And I felt no worth, you paid it all for me. You have been so kind to me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't turn it, I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. There's no shadow you won't light up, mountain you won't climb up, coming after me. There's no wall you won't kick down, lie you won't tear down, coming after me. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. Oh, I couldn't turn it, and I don't deserve it. Still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Oh, it chases me down, fights till I'm found, leaves the 99. I couldn't turn it, I don't deserve it, still you give yourself away. Oh, the overwhelming, never-ending, reckless love of God. Yeah.